Sanbonani, Molweni, Namaste, Vanakkam, Hetepu, and welcome to this Sunday's episode of The People's Voice, produced and presented by your host, Shabnam Palesa Mohamed for Salaamedia, your humanitarian journalism portal and platform. We're broadcasting live from Tegwini, Durban, KZN, and we have a critical show lined up tonight. Before I tell you anything else, I'm going to start the watch party from the Salaamedia page. So I'm going to go to the Salaamedia page on Facebook and I'm going to look for this live video and I'm going to start a watch party. If you're already tuned in via the Salaamedia page, do start a live video to your page so that all of your friends and your networks will be able to join us in a very important conversation. And we are starting with the watch party. There we go. The watch party will be starting in my page. All right, like I said, critical conversation that we're going to be having today. We are unpacking the legal, the medical, and the scientific issues with 5G in South Africa. It's a controversial topic, and it's a conversation we need not shy away from. It's one that we need to have. So I want to be sure that you're tuned in so you can comment, question, ask our guest questions, share your ideas, and here's how we do it. You're watching the show on the Salaamedia Live Facebook page. You can also listen live via the Salaamedia website, that's audio, and of course the Salaamedia YouTube channel. You can also listen live via the Salaamedia and TuneIn app, and of course all free-to-air decoders. You could WhatsApp your comments and questions to 0617660355. That's 0617660355. I'd much prefer it on the live video, of course, so we'll be able to catch them in real time. All right, so it's the 16th of August in South Africa, which marks the 8-year anniversary of the Marikana massacre. And of course, we have to mention this. It's 8 years since the mine workers were slaughtered by the capitalist government and the rulers that they work for. And of course, the mine workers and the families they left behind have to date not received any justice for what it is that they experienced. So our solidarity with the deceased mine workers and their families. Today we'll be in conversation about the legal, the medical, and the scientific issues with 5G in South Africa, and of course the advocacy and activism. What can be done about 5G in South Africa? All right. So we're going to start with a video or interview with Professor Karthy Govender, who's of course a constitutional and an administrative law expert, an academic, a former South African Human Rights Commissioner, commissioner with the Commission, as well as a High Court judge. So we pre-recorded this interview earlier this week, and let's hear from Professor Karthy Govender. What are the issues with cell phone companies wanting to build 5G masts on your private property, near your private property? Are your constitutional rights affected? Let's unpack the legal issues first. So on The People's Voice, we are in conversation with constitutional and administrative law expert, academic, former South African Human Rights Commission commissioner, as well as a High Court judge, Professor Karthy Govender. Welcome to The People's Voice.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you having me on your program, Shabnam. Thank you so much. Nice to see you again.
It's an honor, having been one of your students at UKZN many years ago, so it's wonderful to have you on. All right, Prof, let's get straight into it. What is our common law and property law position on mobile operators demanding to be able to put 5G apparatus on private property?
Yes, I think we've come a long way after the democracy, and property rights now are no longer protected in the same way as property rights were protected in the past. So when we think about property rights now, we have to think about the broader objectives of our constitution. So the cases I've spoken about, that property rights have to be taken into account together with the need to end homelessness, the need to improve the quality of life of people. So we have a much more balanced approach. However, I think that people's property rights are tied in with other rights, such as the right to a healthy environment, the right to not to be subject to things that could damage their health. All those issues are built into this process. So when you talk about property rights, as far as the people and the applicants that you're going to discuss now, I think property rights is just part of a much broader picture, because what people are concerned about is the impact that these devices could have on their health, could have on their environment, could have on the work environment, etc. So it's a whole host of rights that come into play in this instance.
Absolutely. One would imagine that in this day and age, any corporate or technocratic corporation would not be able to just build wherever they feel like at or near a private property and then say there's nothing you can actually do about it because government is on our side. Prof, what constitutional rights are impacted by this move by mobile operators and their political allies? Can you unpack that for us?
Yes, as I indicated, that people have a whole variety of rights in our constitution. And one important right is the right to access the courts. So ultimately, you know that in a constitutional democracy, it's not just some politician making a decision and there's no recourse except through elections. There are very defined, clear rights for us to approach the courts. And once that happens, then people have to justify their behavior. And they have to justify their behavior in terms of a whole variety of laws, including the right that they've not unjustifiably violated any constitutional rights. So I assume that if legal action is brought in this case, the argument will be on the basis that they did not act in accordance with the enabling legislation, that they did not act in accordance with the Promotion of Administrative Justice Act, and finally that the consequence of the decision amounts to a violation of a whole series of constitutional rights. So I suspect the challenge will be along those lines, and the government would then have to justify the decision. I think I should also just add that the legal challenge has to be distinguished from other challenges, right? So people that are opposing this must do what, and I'm not advising them, but I'm just looking back on history, but many other organizations like the Treatment Action Campaign adopted a dual approach. The one approach was the legal approach. The other was the approach of engaging in the political terrain, protest actions, challenging politicians, and to my mind, if an organization is successful, they have to follow this dual strategy.
Absolutely agree with you on that one, Prof. Is 30 days from an administrative law, viewpoint, is it enough during lockdown? Is that 30-day notice enough to civil society? And I'm talking, the poor and the homeless don't have access to newspapers and media to know anything about how this might affect their health, leave alone be able to respond to 30 days of notice. It seems like it's a draconian measure that's being pushed through during lockdown, and I don't think 30 days are enough. What do you think?
I think if it occurred during the lockdown, I think they will have a difficulty sustaining that they acted procedurally fairly. And many of these cases, incidentally, are decided on the basis that people were not given a proper opportunity to respond. And I would be surprised if they simply push through this 30-day process if it occurred during the lockdown. I'm not familiar with that, but if you're correct on that, because at some point during the lockdown, people did not have the opportunity to engage with each other, to reflect on these issues, to debate it amongst themselves, to gather, and to come up with a coherent and proper response. And I think judges that would hear this would be quite influenced by the fact that people were not able to engage with other people and to formulate their arguments properly and then to present their arguments fully. So I think you're probably right that if they persist with this notice period, there could be difficulties. And bear in mind that some big cases were decided on the basis that people were not treated procedurally fairly. You may recall, Shabnam, that the whole, under President Zuma, they were pushing this whole nuclear project. And one of the reasons why this the court found against the government was that there were questions about whether on procedural fairness.
100%. Well, I know that there has been a civil society campaign to write to the authorities and say to them, we need an extension, and there's been absolutely no response to that as well, which is shocking considering we're under lockdown, and it's such an important decision that they're trying to make. So, Prof, let's talk about some international and national case precedents. In 2020, a UK court judge, Nolan QC, refused to gag a 5G risk information advocate and scientist, asserting that the public have a right to know the risks. In 2018, our Cape Town High Court declared the erecting of a cell tower near private property by Telkom without municipality authorization to be illegal. In 2017, the Supreme Court of India's Justice Gogoi and Justice Sinha ordered a cell tower to be dismantled due to a claimant alleging it caused him a form of cancer. The provider and others were also fined. And in 2013, the Supreme Court of India upheld a 200-page judgment to remove all cell towers from the vicinity of schools, hospitals, old age homes, etc. And that's exactly what would happen if this was allowed to go through, if 5G was allowed, that all of these towers and these apparatus wouldn't necessarily near people's homes, schools, playgrounds, hospitals, old age homes, etc., which has massive implications for healthcare, for the right to privacy and dignity, for property rights, etc. What are the prospects of success of a planned legal challenge? Because there is a legal challenge in the making. What are the prospects of success of that challenge to 5G in our country, in South Africa?
Yes, I think a lot is going to depend on the evidence that is presented. What the courts ask, as far as the general principles of legality are concerned, and I don't want to be too technical about this, but they ask the question, is there a rational connection between what you're doing and the objective you're seeking to achieve? Now, obviously, the 3G process is to provide faster connectivity and is supposed to be much more technologically advanced to enable us to do a whole host of things. By the same token, they have to satisfy, or government has to satisfy itself, that the technology is safe and that you're not going to be adopting a technology that's going to have a whole host of other problems associated with it. So I think a lot will turn on the medical evidence and the challenges that 5G presents. And the court's role is a much more limited one. If the challenge is in terms of rationality, they simply ask, is there this rational connection? If the challenge is in terms of the Promotion of Administrative Justice Act, they ask a slightly broader question, is government acting reasonably? And there, the question is, has government taken cognizance of the major objections to it? And does government have appropriate answers to those objections? So I think it's going to depend whether the challenges will be brought in terms of paja or in terms of rationality. I suspect they will try to bring it in terms of paja because there's a greater chance that the applicants will succeed because the bar is slightly higher for government. I can't pronounce on the merits of the case because obviously you have to hear the arguments, etc. But I do think it's important for people to access the courts. At the very least, you force government to justify their behavior. And if officials know that there's litigation pending, my experience has been that the behavior generally is better because they know ultimately they're answerable to a court, so their behavior is better. So I encourage South Africans, if they can, and obviously litigation is a emotionally draining and an expensive endeavor, but if you can do it and have an impartial judge adjudicate and have government and all the other parties have to justify their conduct, it is the essence of our constitutional democracy and one of the important checks and balances that we've put in place.
Well, it's certainly going to be an epic David and Goliath battle. On the Dear South Africa petition, there are over 57,000 signatures already of people who are saying, no, we don't want 5G, and we want proper investigations into the impacts of cell phones and cell towers on people's health and lives. Final question, Prof. given the information available on 5G and South Africa's corruption virus, why should we adopt a strong precautionary principle on 5G and keep an eagle eye on conflict of interest issues?
Look, you are absolutely correct to say that we must be very wary and be skeptical and challenge things, because what we're hearing from the Zondo Commission is mind-boggling. And it's not just the Zondo Commission. There are various other commissions that have indicated just how rampant this cronyism and corruption is in the society. We need to be satisfied that the political decisions that have been made in the best interests of the country. And I think asking hard questions and constantly asking questions and challenging is part of that process. And I think the worst thing that government can do in these circumstances is not be open and transparent. I think if you sit as a judge, you ask yourself the question, just how open and honest has government been? And if government comes to you and says, this is the problem we're facing, these are the challenges we're facing, these are the 3 or 4 options we identified to address the problem, and the reason we chose option 3 is because of the following reasons, and the reasons why we didn't choose the other options are for the following reasons, then you see this process of government working logically, coherently and rationally. And certainly when government briefs senior lawyers, that's the way they operate, that they place the information before you and they say, we haven't done this to satisfy Tony Bai or whoever. We did this for the reason that we are trying to genuinely grapple with the problems. And if government were to do that more often, and I think it's imperative they do that now because of the allegations, they cannot take for granted the response from a citizenry that's constantly hearing that they are to make sacrifices and that the corruption is not being addressed at the level that it should be. And so we're almost getting this disjuncture between the frustrations that we are feeling as a people and government's recognition of the level of our frustration. And I think that could be dangerous in a constitutional democracy if government doesn't come on board. And I think openness and transparency, and I think they've been reasonably good actually with the coronavirus. They said, here's the problem. We're going to get in people with expertise to help us. And we're going to share information. I think with the tenders was a real mess up. Why someone with no experience at all in providing protective clothing should be given these contracts. Those are things that must be explained. But beyond that, I think the way government acted was proper. And that's what they need to do going forward.
All right. Well, the relationship of trust is certainly problematic, and we'll have to keep a close eye and civil society involvement on this matter, amongst others. I want to say a massive and a sincere thank you to Professor Karthy Govender for sharing your expertise and your insight with us today on The People's Voice. Thank you, Prof.
Shabnam, I'm very privileged to be with you. Good luck in the future, and thank you very much for speaking to me.
All right, so you've just watched a recorded interview. Professor Karthy Govender, transparent, incisive, and well-balanced. And of course, we're talking about 5G and government's move with its technocratic friends to erect cell phone masts and 5G apparatus on private property, giving us about 30 days to respond. And of course, civil society is pushing back over 56,000 signatures on the South Africa and counting. No, and of course, Prof. Govender also being very the issues of corruption care issues, which has been exposed during COVID-19. Can we trust government to make any decisions regarding the rollout of 5G and its impact on our health and the right to property? I'm going to take some comments before we welcome our first guest, which will be Professor or Dr. Craig Golding. Let me take some comments first while he gets ready. There's Funky Monkey Govender says, draconian laws. All of our country's governments have sold us out. We must absolutely question what this lockdown was truly about. We have seen the rollout of 5G while many have been locked away indoors globally. Ask yourself why. Comment by Varishka Soma Memdat. If anyone is aware of cell phone towers getting put up in their area where they live, call me or SEDC immediately. The SEDC NGO is highly informed, active, and quick to respond on the 5G tower matter. Des Govender, very few judges left can uphold the integrity of this constitution, human rights, and a fair, balanced trial without being threatened, bribed, or killed. Look at how disappointing the Zondo Commission was. What a waste of further taxpayers' money. And Rashida Khan, of course, great insights. Thank you, Prof. Brilliant comments coming through from the People's Voice audience this evening. All right, on to our first live guest, and that's going to be Dr. Craig Golding. Let's bring him into studio. Dr. Golding, can you just, all right, welcome to the People's Voice, Dr. Golding.
Hello. Hello.
Hello, I can hear some typing in the background. I'm not sure if somebody's mic is not on.
Thank you very much.
Please mute your mic if you're not speaking. Wonderful to have you on. Dr. Golding, can you introduce yourself very quickly? Sadiq, I can hear some typing or noise in the background. Let's mute all of the other mics. Dr. Golding, can you introduce yourself in about 15 seconds for us?
Sure. I'm a specialist physician. I practice in Johannesburg. I have a special interest in anti-aging integrative medicine. I have a master's degree in medical sciences with the University of South Florida. Practice a lot of wellness and health medicine in private practice.
All right, brilliant. So you know exactly what it is you're talking about. In case anybody was wondering, I'm still hearing some feedback from the background. Our other guests need to have their mics on mute, please. All right, Dr. Golding, let's start here. Outline for us the actual and the potential medical health risks posed by 5G.
The thing is, certain frequencies are not good for human health. You know, it falls under the category of environmental toxicity. We know that our environment has been poisoned, oceans, you know, with metals and pesticides and other environmental toxins that upset the normal functioning of the human body. And electromagnetic frequencies, increasing in frequencies like 4G and 5G, you know, disrupt the normal physiology of the body. For example, we know since installation of 4G that there's been 40-45% increased risk of cancer, or incidence of cancer. This may be an association, or it may be causative as one of the environmental toxicants that are affecting human physiology. So with increasing frequency, especially with 5G, what one finds is an increased calcium influx into the cells, and that can disrupt the nervous system. So we're seeing the possibility of even further increase in neurodegenerative diseases, disruption in normal nervous system activity, so anxiety and depression and chronic fatigue, and as I've said, a significant increased risk for cancer. And you know, even hormones tend to be disrupted. I've seen a lot of disrupted thyroid hormones and adrenal gland hormones, and a lot of people have been suffering with fatigue and weight gain, and you know, the effects of environmental toxicity. So there's no doubt at all that these bad electromagnetic frequencies, as I said, as an environmental toxin, do affect the normal functioning of the human body. So it's a huge concern in terms of human health.
I'm just wondering, Dr. Golding, whether, you know, device insurers can be insured against these risks. Can insurance be taken out? And I know Tracey is going to speak to this a bit, but you're a doctor. Do you know of any insurance company that will insure a device user against these medical and health risks?
To be honest, I'm not aware of specific insurance against this. And also one would need to prove an absolute cause, you know, to say that, For example, let's say that you developed breast cancer. One would have to prove that the electromagnetic frequency was a direct cause. So insurance companies are probably going to be hesitant because there's a lot of studies, that show the risk and very few studies that show the safety. So we know there's certainly an increased risk. The question is, is it a direct causative factor? And that one would need to prove. And I think the insurance companies are going to be very apprehensive and very careful to give insurance cover against these health risks.
Of course, absolutely. Lots of money to lose, lots of legal cases and lawsuits will be coming up, certainly. Dr. Golding, what you've described in terms of I'm still getting some feedback. I'm not sure whose mic is still on, but Dr. Golding, what you've described to me sounds like a violation of the Nuremberg Code, where humans are not supposed to be experimented on. And of course, there's 10 principles, etc., in the Nuremberg Code that is, summarized. But why do people not know about these medical and health risks and get called conspiracy theorists merely for talking about them, to the point where if you raise it on social media, you get blocked by these social media companies? I mean, is it a violation of the Nuremberg Code, and why do people not know about the risks?
Yes, I think it's an absolute violation of the Nuremberg Code because, what human safety studies have been done on 5G? And is the public aware of the risks? As you say, they're not aware of the risks. And if you want to, put up these towers and expose humanity and human beings and even animal life, birds and plants and animal life to these frequencies, then we need some safety studies to show that this experiment, in inverted commas, I guess you could say, has been proven safe, and it hasn't. So that's the first violation of human rights. You need to first of all inform the people of the risks, and then have their consent to allow them to be literally experimented on with towers that have no safety data. So I have very little doubt that the Nuremberg Code is broken here. I mean, just because of those two essential points that I've mentioned here. Where's the informing of the public that this is going to be done? Why is it done or trying to be implemented during lockdown where they don't have a say, or we don't have a say? And where's the safety data? It's non-existent.
Absolutely agree with Dr. Craig. We've just lost him there. Click back to the linkization with Dr. Craig Golding. All right, we're back. Dr. Golding, very quickly, and I'm going to have one question after this for you. How do you treat people who are suffering from all of these cell phone and cell tower and soon 5G, unfortunately, unless we resist, related illnesses? I mean, are there treatments available, or do you find yourself struggling with how do I treat these people because I can't deal with the cause?
Right. I mean, obviously we look at all the other environmental toxins as well, like heavy metals, for example, and we look at the deficiency states that a person may have. So it's more a holistic picture than looking just purely at EMF. But I would say that some people are certainly more electrosensitive than others, and these people need to take extra care. I mean, we do have some wonderful nutraceuticals, for example, like resveratrol, EGCG, a green tea extract, epigallocatechin gallate, EGCG for short, vitamin C. These kinds of nutraceuticals and vitamins can help you detoxify from the EMF exposure. And we have some, if I can call them toys in inverted commas, some stones from Russia, shungite and crystals and things like that can actually help protect you from the EMF and from these very high frequencies that can be damaging to your bodily physiology. So there are some protective measures you can take, and avoidance is really, really difficult. It's very hard to avoid Wi-Fi and cell phones in today's world. So I think avoidance where possible, but if you're living in a city environment, it's very hard to avoid. So you need to take some protective measures. I like to advise my patients about the protective nutraceuticals. As I've said, resveratrol is very useful, EGCG, and perhaps getting a crystal and doing the obvious. When you go to bed, make sure your cell phone's off. Put the Wi-Fi off in your home. Don't leave your home a huge electromagnetic frequency exposure state, if I can put it that way.
100% agree with you. Last question, very quickly. Where can people find more information on the medical and health risks and how they can protect themselves? Would they go to the South African Integrated Medicine, or where would they find more information?
the reception here is poor. Sorry about that. Yes, they can go to SASM, the South African Society of Integrative Medicine. I also have a website, drcgolding.co.za. I think I'll put together a nice article and put that up as well. I've written many articles on detoxification and environmental toxicity and various natural medicine tools and integrative medicine tools that one can use to detoxify and also protect yourself. But I think what we should do is do a very focused article on reducing your risk of EMF exposure and also what you can do to protect yourself and what you can do to detoxify yourself. So you've given me some homework. Thank you for that. I'll put together a nice article and make sure it's published on my website and on the SASM website as well, so that people can have the essential knowledge as to what to do.
All right. Thanks, Dr. Golding. We've got it. Thank you for those tips, Dr. Golding, to reduce toxins. And that's from Des Govender. Thank you, Dr. Golding, for joining us this evening on The People's Voice.
My pleasure.
All right. We've been in conversation with Dr. Craig Golding, talking about the medical and health risks, and moving right along. We're next in conversation with Karl Muller, who is a physicist as well as a journalist. Let's bring him onto studio, Sadiq.
Hello.
Karl Muller, welcome to The People's Voice. Yes, we can hear you. Can you introduce yourself in about 15 seconds?
Yes, I was trained as a physics teacher. I worked as a physics teacher for about 20 years. And then around 1989, I saw that there was going to be troubles with cell phones, and this was going to be only resolved in the media. So I became a journalist. I live now in the Kingdom of Eswatini. I'm actually working as a scientific editor these days, and I mostly deal with statistical papers for journal publication. And the reason I chose statistics is because so many of these arguments about are they cell phone safe are conducted on statistical grounds, and I really wanted to be on top of the statistics. So my head is more full of statistics than I like to think.
All right, well, that's very useful. Let's get straight into the interview, Karl. What are the scientific and technological dangers of 5G? Can you hear me now? All right, I'll just repeat the question. What are the scientific and technological dangers of 5G in this rapidly developing world? We're under pressure to move faster all the time.
Shabnam, I can't see or hear you.
All right, Sadiq, I seem to be having a technical issue.
Can you hear me?
Yes. That's the question. What are the technological and the scientific dangers with 5G?
The issues with 5G in South Africa. South Africa is one of the main countries rolling out 5G in Africa. 5G is a very different technology to anything we've seen before. 5G is going to involve very dense location of masts everywhere across the environment. It's going to involve thousands of satellites beaming down radiation at us. It's going to involve the human population and the whole environment of the Earth radiated at levels we've never even remotely seen before, at very close range, at enormously high frequencies. It's a very different world to anything we've seen before. I just want to say one thing about 5G. 5G uses a whole range of frequencies. And one of the main frequencies they're planning to use, or are already using, is 60 gigahertz of extremely high frequency. 60 gigahertz is chosen specifically because it is absorbed by oxygen, which means that if a signal propagates through air, it gets absorbed by the oxygen and it won't propagate too far. This is very useful for engineers because it means that they can reuse the frequencies nearby. But this means masts have to be very, very close to you because these signals are not going to travel very far. And also, these signals are absorbed by oxygen. Now, all living creatures use oxygen. It's very much part of their metabolism. And to target oxygen and radiate at a very, very close range with radiation that's precisely tuned to the oxygen molecule is just the craziest thing I've ever heard in my entire life. There are a couple of people, more than one person is saying it's the craziest thing the human race has ever done. And the 60 gigahertz is already in use. They are making the 60 gigahertz spectrum unlicensed. Using 60
All right,
gigahertz
Karl
for
Muller is coming to us from the
drones.
Kingdom of
Facebook
Eswatini.
are already using it to connect cities. Google have already used 60 gigahertz for a little radar that they put in a cell phone. It's called the Pixel 4 cell phone. This cell phone has a 60 gigahertz radar in it that maps the movements of your fingers. You can wave at your phone and it'll switch itself on. I think this is very clever. They're radiating in a 15-meter bubble of 60 gigahertz radiation. Now, these smartphones are on sale now around the world. So already 60 gigahertz is being very widely used. No one has done any testing to see if you radiate people at very close range with radiation that's absorbed by oxygen, does this have any effect on the human body? I would think it does. No one has tested. They're just going to roll it out and test it on us. And as Dr. Golding said, this is a strict test. This is human experimentation. They're experimenting on us to see how we react. And I mean, I hate to think what's going to happen, but it's. I have gone on record many times saying this is the most disastrous hazard that life on Earth has ever faced. And I'll keep on saying it until, and I hope I'm not proved right, but it's a disastrous hazard.
Absolutely agree with you. Nawawi Matthew is just raising his experience with audio, not too clear. Karl, my second question for you is, why isn't this knowledge that you've shared with us more widely known in society? Because people just don't know what it is you're talking about. Why don't people know?
I've also been asked to talk about why this is not more widely known. I work as a journalist, so I've worked inside the media, and I've seen this. No doubt that there's, I don't even want to call it a cover-up. Newspapers and so on get a vast amount of money from advertising from cell phone companies, from the operators. Governments get vast amount of revenue from cell phone operators, vast amounts. They get millions just from selling the spectrum. So there's huge vested interests in shutting up any talk about the risks. I have made a special study of cell phone towers, and I've collected all the studies that have been done anywhere in the world on towers. I found 33 studies. 32 of them report a very, very clear and consistent range of health problems, including raised cancer rates. There's in Canada.
Right, Karl Muller just experiencing some technical difficulties there, but we're talking about why people don't know about the dangers involved in cell phone technology and 5G.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Can you hear me? Okay. Yes, I was saying I worked in the media. You need to understand the cell phone or the telecoms industry is now the single richest and most powerful industry that has ever existed on Earth. They have enormous wealth and enormous resources. And there's no doubt about the fact that they influence the media. And as I said earlier, I've lobbied hundreds of journalists. It's almost impossible to find one journalist anywhere prepared to stick their neck out and say one word about wireless technology and its possible dangers. So thanks, Shabnam, very much for your courage in taking up this issue.
Thank you, Karl, for your commitment to exposing exactly what it is that's going on. Karl, how do we create greater awareness in civil society? More education, documentaries, legal action? What do we do?
The main thing is, I've said many times, the only thing that really helps in fighting this battle is publicity. People need to be made aware of the risks. Just at a very simple level, telling people to minimize the exposure to cell phones. Don't talk for too long. Don't give it to small children. Just be aware that there's a problem. Just a little bit of awareness. If you know that it's dangerous, you can take a few precautions. Don't put cell phones in your pocket, for example. You know, there are dozens of studies, literally dozens, showing terrible damage to human sperm from cell phones, from cell phone radiation. We know that this is damaging human fertility. We know for a fact. In fact, in the Second World War, they found radar operators were going sterile. It was one of the first signs that microwaves were dangerous, was sterility. Fertility rates have dropped catastrophically all around the world. We all know Japan and China, the birth rates have dropped, and they are now aging societies. But it's the same thing with America. It's everywhere. We are finding these fertility drops. If you're just aware, but now what one can actually do, these 5G masts, these 5G towers are coming everywhere. They're going to come. Doesn't matter where you are. If you're in a deep rural area, they'll put a balloon over your head. Google flies balloons. They've flown them. One crashed in KZN a few years ago. They're flying balloons to beam microwaves down at you. They have got thousands of satellites. They'll be beaming them down. There will literally not be 1 inch of this earth that's not radiated. But when these masts come outside your bedroom window, when they come to your street, you have to fight them. You have to fight them. I'll tell you something. They tell you that you mustn't hold your cell phone closer than 1 inch from your head. They say just that inch away from your head helps because the radiation falls off. But then with these mini cell phone towers, they say, oh, these towers are going to be so close to your house, we don't have to radiate you much. So it's so close to you now that it's safe, but if it's too close to your head, you must take it further away. There's a complete contradiction in what they're saying. These masts are terribly dangerous. As I say, I've collected every single study. I've collected every single study in the world on masts. There's 32 studies.
We've got a question for you, Karl, from Nawawi Matthews, and he says, will 5G affect the migratory birds' navigation?
You know, I used to work for Farmers Weekly magazine, and I spoke to them. We used to, absolutely, without question, absolutely without question. I used to work for Farmers Weekly magazine. We ran a weekly pigeon column, and I used to speak to the pigeon fanciers, and many of them said, we've given up. We lose too many birds. We're losing tens of thousands of birds. Now, to be affected. There have been several studies in India. They found 15 minutes of cell phone exposure to a hive, and the bees just disappear. They swarm and they disappear and they never come back. There's something called colony collapse disorder where the bees are dying out all over the world. We know what's causing this now. It's cell phone radiation.
About how 5G will affect
and if they
birds, and I would deny there are actually studies. If you want to be in contact with Karl Muller, we can certainly pass your details. He is available to assist us on his expertise related to of course, 5G. Governors have so much autonomy. Absolutely agree. I mean, an important point was raised about funding.
It's a new beginning. It's a new era. Salaamedia, humanitarian journalism.
Osman's Taj Mahal Spice and Rice. For over 80 years, Osman's Taj Mahal have been perfecting the art of the perfect blend of spices, pure, aromatic, and well-seasoned. Spices to tantalize your taste buds. From creative cuisines to gastronomical gourmet goodies. From exotic odors to traditional dishes, Osman's Taj Mahal have remained synonymous with quality spices and condiments. Taj Mahal rice, beans, and lentils. Try our range of chili bite mixes, rose and ilachi syrup, our quick and easy biryani pack, and our traditional range of spice blends. Osman's Taj Mahal. There is no substitute for quality.
And we're back on Palesa Mohamed for Salaamedia, talking all things education the medical and health risks, the scientific and technological dangers. And we're going to be in conversation with an activist against 5G, and we'll bring into studio Tracey Lee Dorney.
Hello, Shabnam. Welcome. Thank you. Nice to be invited. Thank you so much.
You're absolutely welcome. It's a great pleasure to have you on, Tracey. Let's begin here. What about this campaign against cell phone towers and cell phone technology and EMF generally, but specifically 5G? What about it has turned you into an activist? Is it personal?
Well, I think what's turned me into an activist is the fact that the South African government has not consulted the public about 5G. It's allowed infrastructure to be put up during lockdown, and it has clearly ignored the science, which is so robust now that there shouldn't have been any question about even attempting to roll out 5G. The Minister of Health and its Radiation Control Department have ignored the science for years. They've also ignored communities and people that are being affected throughout South Africa. We've written letters to the Minister of Health, to Leon de Toy at the Radiation Directorate, and they honestly are turning a blind eye to all of this. Also, the fact that President Ramaphosa has allowed 5G, additional 5G, to be switched on and rolled out en masse at this time when the public are at their most vulnerable, that truly is not acceptable. And I think that's, made several groups, activist groups, and our foundation join forces now to try and make an effort to have a moratorium on 5G and to do a legal challenge against it. And whether it's personal for me, I believe at this stage it's personal for everybody. As a mother, it is also deeply personal, because I wish for my child a healthy future and an environment that is healthy, protected, our trees, our animals, and that they can go on to enjoy life and not have a myriad of health symptoms happening. I know there are parents out there who want the same for their children. And the fact that I have also been personally affected, personal experience with the impacts of electromagnetic radiation, the biological impacts firsthand, has also given me a better understanding about the science and how true it is. And becoming electrosensitive from the exposures I've had has enabled me to help other people that are being affected, and to make them feel that there's nothing strange about them. It's perfectly normal. We are electromagnetic creatures, so we are going to have blowback from exposure. And people have to understand when they are being affected what those symptoms are and what they can do about it. But our government needs to understand that we are being chronically affected out in the public.
All right, Tracey, let me ask you this. All right, we've got to put that volume down there. Okay, so let me ask you this question. One of the biggest insurance companies in the world, Lloyd's, has refused to insure against EMF dangers, risks, medical health, etc., and 5G will be no exception. No company is going to insure against EMF health risks. Do you agree? Tell us more.
No, they're not insuring against EMF health risks, but what is more important, and people don't know this, that not one cell phone company in this country, or even in fact worldwide, can obtain insurance for the emissions from their towers, from Wi-Fi routers or cell phones. In fact, Lloyd's already stopped insuring cell phones in 1999 already. They wouldn't insure manufacturers. And so Lloyd's, as the underwriters of Lloyd's, are putting that clause now. And Swiss Re, another huge insurance company, has called 5G one of the highest risks in the insurance industry, with a load of claims to be expected.
All right, well, it's going to be no different in South Africa. An insurance company to come forward and say, we'll insure people against these risks. I like to see it happen. But Tracey, you've been campaigning for a very long time now against all of these medical and health dangers. Now 5G, of course, we're on the trail together with people like Emma. What impact has this campaigning had? What are the successes you can tell us about?
Well, we started over 10 years ago, our foundation, the Electromagnetic Radiation Research Foundation of South Africa. It was formed by a group of doctors, international advisors, because at that stage, the international scientists were the ones that were all up to speed. Fortunately, with education with our doctors, the doctors that are open to learning, like Craig, who has taken the time to study the science and see how it relates to his patients. Fortunately, there are more doctors, but we think that we've at least raised the awareness amongst the medical fraternity. In schools, we've spent time talking at schools. We've stopped cell towers at schools. And we sent a myriad of letters, which are all on file to our government years ago, including international scientists who've written to our Minister of Health, Professor Johansson, warning them about the effects on the South African public at large, and that they must be looking at it. So yes, we've tried to create the awareness, but we are up against a big moneyed corporates, and honestly, the lack of ethics, honesty, and transparency by the telecoms industry is legendary. And I've seen that.
Tracey, you've mentioned letters being written to government, and we'll take a comment from Shahid Mohamed just after this question. Has government ever responded to these letters by these various experts with decades of experience? Any response whatsoever?
None, including to the international scientists. The Minister of Health never ever responded to Professor Johansson, didn't even have the courtesy to do so. And the letters that we've written to, the Minister of Health and with all the science, the submissions we've done to the City of Cape Town, to Patricia de Lille, to Helen Ziller, to all the political parties, the ANC is very well aware, this government, of the impacts and the science, but they are choosing at this point, or they've been incentivized to ignore them.
Serious implications, but I do see that civil society is far more aware than they would like us to be. Having said that, there's major attempts at censorship on social media. Let's take a comment from Shahid Mohamed, and he asks, what about the issue of the source of cell phone material from war-torn DRC and the support from the South African government to supply soldiers to police the mines there? That's a very important point. Do you agree, Tracey?
Well, I think that is a very sore point. It just shows where the ethics of our government lie, and where's the motivation? Is it financial that they're ignoring the health? I mean, they're very aware of communities that are being severely affected and individuals that are being affected. So that just demonstrates further lack of ethics when it comes to the South African public.
Absolutely. Tracey, this new policy that's been put on the lockdown with their comments, I'm seeing in the background, mute your mic so I can question. This new policy that's being pushed through on live installations to respond, no response on an extension despite the science. What is your appeal to civil society and government?
Okay, well,
telecom, being allowed to build 5G on private and public property.
Sorry, I think you've gone.
Now, I'll repeat the question. It's interesting that we're having these technological issues.
Isn't it amazing? It was all fine earlier on.
It was all fine earlier on. All right. The question again is, this new policy being pushed under lockdown, 30 days to respond, no extension. What is your appeal to civil society with regards to our government being allowed to let telecom companies build 5G towers and cell phone masts wherever they feel like? What's your appeal to civil society? What's your message?
Well, I think civil society's got to fight back. This is totally unacceptable. We bar the fact of the health implications, it's been demonstrated for property value that if a cell tower is next to property, you will can lose between 35 and 50% of your property value. Now, imagine trying to sell your house when you have a 5G tower on it. It will become impossible. So, are there health impacts? Who's going to pay you out your property value to put the tower there? You're not going to be able to sell it again. We've seen houses that have gone to auction and apartments with cell towers on them, and they just don't go because people don't want to live next to a cell tower, even if they don't fully understand the science. They all know now, and so many people are being affected. And you look at our government's not even looking at the past impacts of WiMAX, 3G, 4G, and studied what's happened to the health of South Africans after the rollout of all those technologies. For instance, since 2011, 2012, when 4G is rolled out, cancer statistics have gone up 45%, especially with breast cancer. So, they're not looking at it, looking at all these health impacts that as each new technology rolls out, what is happening to the health of South Africans, So I would appeal to the civil society at large to fight back, join, help the groups. There is the Stop 5G. There's a big legal challenge against 5G. So
I want to get to that in a second, Tracey. Quick comments here. Of course, Emma has mentioned that you are the chairperson of the Electromagnetic Radiation Research Foundation of South Africa, and you've got an extensive CV, so you know exactly what it is that you're talking about. Shahid Mohamed says we need to create flyers in different languages, both digital and print leaflets and flyers for mass distribution. And of course, we need meetings with the unions. And I think that's also really, really important, Tracey. And I'm sure you agree with that. So my last question for you, Tracey, how can people find out more? How can they help? How can they join the national campaign?
Well, as I say, all of us, groups from the foundations to the other activist groups have joined forces now. And we first would ask that you also help support Dear South Africa on 5G towers. They've done an excellent campaign, as you mentioned earlier on. If they can go onto that website, dearsouthafrica.co.za /5G towers, and obviously sign against the fact that you don't want to be allowed to have a 5G tower on your property. And then there's the group that's been formed now to do a legal challenge against 5G. It's a group of doctors and civilians, the public, that are all banded together now to try and make an effort. So I would ask the public, please, then to go on to Safe Technology for SA.home.blog /actions for doc, which I'm sure we can post on perhaps on the Facebook. If you go onto that blog and website, it will give you all the instructions on how to assist. We obviously need as many people as possible. We're fundraising for the legal campaign, and on that website, it will tell you where to put in the funds and where you can possibly help and join the various groups that are taking on different responsibilities. And for anybody who is a politician or can make a difference and can work with government, then we need their help as well to swing this another way. We certainly need a moratorium on 5G for the health and safety of South Africa.
We need a moratorium on 5G. Shahid Mohamed, well-researched and comprehensive exposure. Well done. Let's make this exposure go viral. Charmaine Traherne and Emma Kelly are also posting links on the live video and the watch party. So go and have a look. We have to round up now. We'll have to leave it there. I want to say thank you to all our guests this evening, Professor Karthy Govender for the recorded interview, Dr. Craig Golding, Karl Muller, and Tracey Lee Dorney for joining us, our listeners and our viewers for interacting, and of course, the Salaamedia team. Keep the conversation on 5G going, and remember, you've got to make a difference in the world. That's what the purpose of human life is. Revolutionary peace. Assalamu alaikum.